My mom said I was ungrateful for refusing her gift, so I pulled out the receipts that proved she was just re-gifting my own things back to me. I'm 26F and my mom, Linda, 55, is loud, dramatic, and very invested in being seen as the selfless, generous parent. Growing up, she was the one who organized birthdays and never missed a recital. But she also had this habit of cleaning out her house and finding things she knew I liked, then presenting them back to me later as gifts. At family events, she'd bask in the little chorus of, "Oh, Linda is so thoughtful." And I learned early on that pointing out the mechanics of those moments usually led to guilt trips. So for years, I let it slide. The pattern shifted from mildly annoying to actively aggravating over the last 18 months. It wasn't only that she reboxed things and handed them back as presents. It was the performance that followed whenever I refused or pointed out an obvious repeat. She would look wounded, accuse me of being ungrateful, and then tell anyone within earshot that I'd hurt her feelings for no reason. The talks with her always ended the same way, me apologizing to quiet the scene, her getting the sympathy she liked, and nothing changing. So when she called and said she had a special gift for my birthday, I told her plainly, I didn't want anything. I wanted lunch, not a show. She took it personally anyway. When she arrived with a silver-wrapped box and that big, staged smile, I opened it in front of family, because that's how it always happened. The reveal, the applause redirected to her. Inside was a cream sweater. I know sweaters, the weight of the yarn, the little pull near the hem, the way a brand stitches a cuff. This was exactly the one I'd bought for myself 2 months earlier and left in a dresser when I moved apartments. For a beat, I felt ridiculous for noticing, like I'd misplaced my sense of proportion. But the reality was sharp. This was my sweater, folded and taped and wrapped to look like a surprise. Her face tightened the second I didn't burst into ecstatic gratitude. She launched into the familiar script about effort and how children often forget what their parents do. I tried to explain that the sweater was mine, that I'd bought it, that I'd left it behind when I moved, but she didn't want explanations. She wanted the moment. She wanted the performance of generosity. When I quietly said no thanks and set the box aside, she read that refusal as a moral failure on my part. After she left, something in me that had been accumulating for years decided it wasn't going to be smoothed over anymore. I didn't want to be the person who let the story be written for them. I dug through old emails and bank statements that night and started matching dates. It took time, but within an evening I had a stack. Order confirmations, photos, timestamps. The sweater showed up on my order history, the mug she'd found. At Easter was listed under my credit card from months earlier. The scarf she'd wrapped for Mother's Day had the same UPC as one I'd returned the prior winter. I counted at least 5 instances in the past year where the new thing she presented as a gift was either literally mine or something I'd bought and replaced. I didn't want a scene in public. I didn't want to humiliate her in front of cousins and aunts who'd already learned her version of things. But I also couldn't let her paint me as ungrateful anymore. So I planned to do something simple and factual, put the receipts and screenshots in front of her where she couldn't spin them away. It happened at New Year's dinner at my aunt's house. The living room was loud with kids and casseroles. My mom was in full cheer mode, preening for the reactions. When it felt like the right moment after the plates had been cleared and before coffee, I pulled out the folder. I laid the receipts and order confirmations on the coffee table, arranged them to match the gifts she'd given me over the last year. I kept my voice steady and said I wanted to show her something. The room pulled in around us. This is the thing I'll always remember. How sudden the quiet was, like someone turned off the music. My mom's expression moved through surprise, confusion, then something that looked dangerously like panic. For a second, I thought she'd laugh it off, apologize, and we'd move on. Instead, she went straight to hurt, the practiced outrage she'd used for years. She told anyone who'd listened that I'd embarrassed her, that I was being cruel and ungrateful. My uncle's eyebrows tightened. My aunt looked at me with a slow, hard curiosity. My cousins glanced between us, not wanting to pick a side. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't show anger. I pointed at the receipts, explained the timestamps, and said I wasn't accusing her of meanness. I was asking for honesty. I asked how she'd expect me to accept a gift when it was something I'd already paid for. I told her how it felt to be the person who apologizes to make the theater stop. The words landed, and a hush followed. She left early that night. Her departing texts were the kind you expect from someone who feels publicly wounded. Dramatic, blaming, asking if I'd go too far. A couple relatives messaged me privately with perfunctory, "Are you okay?" notes. My grandma, usually a defender of both sides, told me she was surprised but also that honesty mattered. For the first time in a long time, I did not apologize to end the noise. I simply put the folder in a drawer and let it be. Update 3 days later. The fallout was a slow burn rather than an explosion. My mom posted a vague status about family and gratitude, and a few relatives who liked a tidy drama chimed in with opinions. I got calls from cousins asking for clarification, and one aunt told me I should have handled it privately. That sting of being lectured for defending yourself is familiar. She'd used it on me for years, but I held my line. I responded to one cousin saying I'd tried privately before, but that pattern had continued. A handful of people quietly thanked me for being honest. A few people unfollowed my mom on social media and messaged me to say they'd seen similar things they'd never mentioned. The most important thing over those 3 days, my mom called twice. The first call was fury folded into tears. She accused me of humiliating her. The second call came late on the third night, softer. She said she'd been thinking and that she didn't intend to make me feel small. The apology wasn't clean or full. It was a halting thing, half explanation, half deflection. I told her that if she wanted our dynamic to change, she'd need to stop using gifts as leverage. She agreed in principle. Update, 6 weeks later. She actually tried. It was minor, but it mattered. For my birthday the following month, she brought a small, hand-picked notebook. No tags, no brand. Not something I'd seen before. She'd written a short note on the first page about a silly memory we shared. The difference wasn't the gift, it was the thought. She'd bought it herself and wrapped it without the whole production. She didn't preface the moment with a speech about how generous she'd been, and she didn't ask for praise afterwards. She left the room during dessert and returned with nothing to perform. We started talking more honestly on the phone. She would still text the occasional guilt-laden line, but the recycled present stopped. I stopped finding my own mugs and boxes with bows. She asked me once, out of the blue, how I'd like to celebrate Mother's Day. A small, practical question instead of a performance. I told her honestly, lunch, no big fuss. She agreed. The social ripple was still there. A few of her friends had already picked sides. A cousin who used to always call me a drama queen was suddenly quieter when we ran into each other. But most of our circle settled into something less theatrical. The relief for me was not that everyone sided with me, but that I no longer carried the compulsion to smooth things over for appearances. Final update, 5 months later. 5 months after the sweater and the receipts, the situation looks, for the most part, ordinary. My mom and I still have tension sometimes. She's who she is, but the performative cycle of give, expect public gratitude, weaponize any refusal has ended. She came to my place last week with store-bought bagels and a coffee thermos. She didn't wrap anything, didn't dramatize anything, and we sat in the kitchen and got coffee in silence for a while. It felt normal in a way that used to be rare. There were costs. A couple relatives who preferred tidy narratives pulled back. There were a few awkward holiday invites for a season. But we also have less theater at family dinners, fewer side comments about my attitude, and, weirdly, a quieter respect that comes from me not backing down. She hasn't owned the whole thing in a sweeping apology. I don't expect that. But she stopped rewrapping my life and passing it back with a bow. If I'd done it differently, if I'd tried counseling with her first, or a softer private confrontation, maybe the drama would have been reduced. I don't regret proving the receipts, though. For too long I had accepted the role she assigned me. The ungrateful daughter who must apologize so the narrative stays intact. Pulling the receipts out in a room full of witnesses changed the narrative. It forced a conversation she'd been able to avoid for years. We're not healed. We won't be perfect. But we now have one of those boring, practical boundaries that actually matters. No more recycle presents, and when gifts happen, they're supposed to be thoughtful rather than staged. I sleep better knowing that I didn't make myself small just to keep someone else looking good.